Billy Napier and the Florida Gators coaching staff, I don't like to be too harsh on you, but I really need you to step some things up in 2024.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. We're available daily and free wherever you listen to the podcast and on YouTube. Happy Wednesday. I'm Brandon Olsen. Find me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. And I do need to say, first off, massive shout out to J. Bud Davis. If you are not familiar with Bud Davis, Bud's been on the show before. Bud's been on quite a few Florida Gators podcasts, if I'm not mistaken. He's on Twitter, X at JBudDavis, whatever you want to call. We are going to try to get him on the show this month. If that's possible, we will have him on the show before the season. But big analytics guy, right? Fantastic with analytics and posting EPA per play, success rate, all this fun stuff. And for me, one of the things that I love is that I am an analytically minded person. I support EPA per play. Like that's something that we talk about, right? I'm a nerd. If you're watching this show on YouTube, you can see me. You can see I'm a nerd. If you're listening, you can hear that I'm a bit of a nerd, right? And if you've ever heard me speak about things, then you know I am a bit of a nerd. But the Florida Gators, with the numbers that J. Bud Davis posted on Monday, Bud Davis, I keep calling him J. Bud Davis. That's his Twitter handle. But Bud Davis, what he posted on Monday was not exactly awesome. One of the things was that Florida, way too predictable. Here you can see the numbers in front of you. These are very fun to see. These are the pistol play calling tendencies. If you're watching, you can see the numbers. If you're listening, you're not missing much. It's just a visual cue here. But the Florida Gators offensive play calling was far too predictable. I got the pistol numbers here. When Florida came out in pistol set, and if you are unfamiliar, pistol is when Graham Mertz is a few yards behind the offensive line. He's a few yards behind the center, and the running back's behind him. When you have that pistol set, Florida ran the ball 66% of that time out of pistol. That is far too predictable. For a defense to be able to see you line up out of pistol or line up in pistol and then be able to say, okay, they're probably running the ball here. That's just an impossible situation to win in. I don't know how you can see this, look at that and go, yeah, that's good. When you come out in pistol, you run the ball 66% of the time. That's horrible. Okay. I also am not a big fan of the splits in terms of personnel grouping. When Florida came out in pistol set, 42% of the time they were in 11 personnel, they were in 12 personnel, 56% of the time. That's fine. Gun offset's the one I have more of an issue with. And I understand, when you think about it, you go, okay, well, they're coming out in 12 personnel because when they come out in pistol, they're probably going to run the ball, and you run the ball better out of 12 personnel. I understand that logic, but you'll probably be more effective on a per play basis if you're less predictable like that. Like when you see 11 personnel here in pistol, a higher EPA per play, basically the same success rate. I'm not going to harp on you there. But I just think that if you cut that closer to 50-50 there, you'll find more success. Again, I'm not harping on the personnel too much here just because it's relatively even there. Again, and also looking at the heavy box numbers, Florida actually succeeded against heavy boxes. Part of that was because of the play action passing attack just being so good, finding success there. But I just think that 66%, it's far, like, again, let's say first, second, and third down, you come out in pistol set. Odds are, that they're running the ball because 2/3 of the time that they come out in pistol, they're running the ball. That's far too predictable. Okay. And it's completely unacceptable. If we're being completely honest about it, it's just far too predictable. This is also one of those times where I say you need to have more gap blocking scheme. Here's another thing too. With the pistol set, Florida wants to be wide zone. Okay. Wide zone isn't built to be run out of pistol. You can run it and it can still be effective, but it's not built to do that. Just saying. That's a fact. That's not even my personal opinion. That's a fact. But you need more gap blocking. And the success rate here, very similar on gap block to zone block, right? Success rate 0.01 higher than it was, or gap blocking 0.01 higher than zone blocking. EPA per play, the same. I think that's okay. I would like to see, again, more gap blocking. I've been saying I think it keeps defenses off balance. The new offensive line combination is built for more gap game. I still think we'll see more gap runs here. Again, I think talking about Damian George specifically, you're going to see more success there with power game. Gap is power running is a gap blocking scheme. So you'll see more success there. Counter there. It's more successful here. And then you look at the out of gun. When Florida comes out of gun offset, so running back offset to the side of the quarterback here, you see 67% of plays out of gun passes. 67% of plays out of gun offset were passes. Only 29% of those passing plays were play action. Okay? I need you to run the ball more out of gun and run play action more. Play actions, EPA per play out of gun is not great. And I do think that a good part of that is because defenses were not respecting your running out of there. Okay? They were not running. And you were bad when you did run out of gun. But you have to be, first off, better there. And I think part of that also is, this is the issue that I had when I was talking about the personnel groupings. 11 personnel when you were coming out of gun offset, 86% of the time, 11 personnel, 86% of the time. Okay? 12 personnel, 9% of the time. You have to be less predictable. We're coming out in 11 person. Like if we're coming out in gun, it's going to be 11 personnel and we're going to throw the ball. Come out in 12 personnel. Run the ball there. Like I'm not saying that it's easy to do. I'm not saying that it's easy to predict, but like there are clear signs as to where you're failing here. And part of that is that play call. We talk about situational play calling. We talk about some things, and for me, like I've said, it's not just the situation, what the situation is calling for. It's that I feel like the play calling has no genuine feel for the game. Come out in 12 personnel more when you're in gun. Run the ball more when you're in gun. Like how can you expect to be successful running the ball out of gun if you don't do it? It's not something you do, and it wouldn't shock me if you look at these runs and when they do run out of gun, it's like 3rd and 9. Wouldn't shock me at all if that's when the runs are coming. When Billy Napier's like, hey, let's just try to get a couple yards and call it a day. Like that wouldn't shock me at all if that's what we see, if that's how we see it. And again, with the new offensive line combination, you're going to answer a lot of these questions, or you're going to be able to run the ball more effectively out of shotgun if you choose to run the ball. You're going to be able to go more gap block scheme, which you should with the expected offensive line combination you're going to have. Should be able to do that. Like you've got to balance some things out. And it goes back to the defense too, which isn't Billy Napier, obviously, but it goes back to the defense too, where I say, hey, some things were really predictable and you have to be better there. And we will talk about the defense, but offensively, like 2/3 of your pistol plays being runs and 2/3 of your gun offset plays being passes is just ridiculously predictable. Only 29% of your gun passing plays being play action is ridiculous. And again, part of that is because they weren't respecting your run game. But also it's proven, it's fact, when you run play action, your passing game is more predictable or is more successful. Whether or not it's predictable that you're going to throw the ball. When you run play action, it's more successful. Fact. Not even up for debate. Okay? Not even up for debate there. I think Florida, you've got a lot to do in order to improve this team really significantly in 2024. It's just, there's a lot to do. And defense, again, like I mentioned, defense is another area there. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer that it gets to first pitch with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. I've said I'm going to a concert this Saturday that I bought on Game Time. I bought those tickets. I'm pumped for it. I'm jazzed for it. I'm just saying, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm going to have a blast. Last minute deals also save up to 60% off buying last minute tickets for sports concerts. I went to the Mets game last week just because I was like, oh, that's a great deal. Why not do it, right? Because why not do it? Game Time's fantastic. It's the only place I buy tickets now. I don't even care if I'm doing it in advance. I still use Game Time for it. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, redeem code Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Just saying. Create an account, redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. And unsurprisingly, the Florida Gators defense, when we look at the numbers, were not good. Because guess what? When you look at the film, they were not good. When you look at not analytical numbers, but just stats, they were not good. When you look at their opponents' offensive numbers against Florida, they were very good. Yeah, Florida was terrible last year defensively, and the numbers prove it as well. It was just hell to sit through, if we're being honest. One of my biggest things is smarter blitzing needs to be a part of this defensive game plan. I've complained about this since last season. I've complained about it during the offseason. The Florida Gators defense last year was aggressive, okay? They were. They blitzed a good bit. And I know that, like, when you say a blitz-happy defense, we're not talking about a team that blitzes 60, 70% of the time. That's not it. But Florida last year needs to be better. Or Florida this year needs to be better blitzing, because Florida last year was so predictable blitzing. The EPA per play when blitzing last year was awful. All right? When not blitzing, it was 0.01 expected points added per play for the other team. Now, or when blitzing, it was 0.2 points added per play for the other team. So it's really bad when you blitzed last year. Part of that was because you got beat so frequently. Part of that was because, and I cannot stress this enough, when Florida blitzed, it was so predictable. I talked about this frequently, where when Florida blitzed last year, so much of it was they're either blitzing from the linebacker spot or they're not blitzing at all. Looking at the top pass rushers, just in terms of who rushed the passer the most, from including everybody. So D-line, edge, linebackers, the top not front four players, so not edge rushers, not defensive linemen. Derek Wingo blitzed 56 times. That was 36% of his pass defense snaps. Scooby Williams, 45 blitzes, 20.1% of his pass defense snaps. Manny Nunnery, 44 blitzes, 30.1% of his pass defense snaps. Shamar James, 30 blitzes. That was 14.2% of his pass defense snaps. Okay? Then you get to Jaden Hill at nickel. He blitzed 20 times the entire season, just 6.3% of his pass defense snaps. Jordan Castell and Miguel Mitchell, 14. Bryce Thornton, 12. Those numbers are nothing. 20% was your top non-front seven blitzer, right? And it was Jaden Hill, or 20 blitzes. Jaden Hill, right? 6.3% of his snaps. 20 times. That's what, 1.25 per game? Something like that? Like, that's, come on now. I think it's 1 1/3. But come on now. That's nothing. That's so irrelevant. That's a nothing burger. Nothing. Horrible. Absolutely horrible. Just in terms of how frequently you blitz them, it was so predictable that, hey, linebackers are blitzing or nobody's blitzing. The reason that Shamar James's percentage was so low is because he was the only linebacker on that team that was even somewhat respectable in coverage. Because, again, if you're listening, you're not missing numbers. If you're watching, you see additional information on this screen here. And you can even see some information that helps out. But Last year, slot receivers and tight ends destroyed Florida. I mean, look at the linebacker room. Shamar James was the only one that was respectable. There's a reason that he didn't blitz as often. Only one that was respectable in coverage. He missed half the year almost. He played, 7 games, if I'm not mistaken? I think it was 7. So, yeah, he missed the majority of the year. Or he missed almost half the year. I don't know why I said the majority. He missed almost half the year. The rest of the linebackers, you had Scooby, wasn't a true linebacker, was an edge rusher playing linebacker. Derek Wingo, not a good coverage linebacker. And Manny Nunnery was supposed to be a good coverage linebacker, wasn't awful. He truly wasn't awful. He just had that one really, really bad play in coverage on the 4th and 14 against Missouri. So for the most part, Manny was not bad in coverage. Really wasn't. But he, 1, wasn't a starter, and 2, gave up a really crucial play in a really crucial time in a really crucial game against a really crucial opponent. Jaden Hill, he exceeded my expectations as a slot corner. I had very low expectations for him. He exceeded those. He still wasn't good. And then, of course, whichever safety would be on the line at that time played there. They weren't very good in coverage. But I will say that the safety room specifically, because a lot of it was Jordan Castell playing in that slot role down near the line of scrimmage, I expected him to be bad in coverage. Just because he's a true freshman. I don't blame you for not being great there. But Florida, I mean, slot targets, when opposing offenses targeted their slot, added 0.44 expected points per play. 52% success rate. Tight ends, 58% success rate. 0.48 expected points added per play. Every 2 targets to a tight end against Florida was a point. That's how nuts it was. And I know, yeah, those guys get targeted more in the red zone. Makes a lot of sense. But that's just unacceptable. There's no other way to put it. It's unacceptable. It's horrible. And I do think that Ron Roberts will help answer a lot of these questions and solve a lot of these issues, specifically the blitzing. I've been saying this. Ron Roberts likes blitzing his nickel, his slot, his star, whatever you want to call him. He likes blitzing that guy. So you're going to see that more frequently, I think, in 2024. Because Ron Roberts is going to say, hey, you know what? Sharif Denson can get mixy there. I also will say I think part of that was that Jaden Hill was not a good blitzer. So I think that they were like, yeah, let's not send him in there. And again, part of it was the linebackers were terrible in coverage. So keep the corners out there, keep the nickel, keep the safety there. So I do think that it was a lot of things. I don't think it was just as simple as Austin Armstrong, when he got to the SEC, choked it. Because when he was at Southern Miss, he was blitzing everybody. Yeah. Hide your kids, hide your wife. They're blitzing everybody out here. That's what it was with Austin Armstrong at Southern Miss. But when he got to Florida, he really dialed that back. And I think a lot of people go, oh, he got scared of the big stage. He got too conservative in the SEC. Once he got to better teams, better opponents, better athletes, he decided to dial it back. I think that that's part of it. But I think that a bigger part of it was linebacker. I think the biggest part of it was that the linebackers were so bad in coverage that it was blitz them so that they're not in coverage and that they're not taking up space out there and covering just grass. And that Jaden Hill wasn't a very good pass rusher from that slot spot. So don't put him out there. Don't put him in that position where he's not going to thrive, and allow him to work in coverage. I think it was multi-layered. Gators were better with middle of the field coverage, or middle of the field closed, which, if you are unaware, middle of the field closed is when you have one safety over top. Middle of the field open is when you have 2 of those safeties over top. Florida was better with middle of the field closed sets. That's not very surprising. But however, that's also a thing that you see a lot of when you see teams giving up big plays, is middle of the field closed. That's why when you watch teams defend the Chiefs, for example, or the Chargers, they go 2 high safeties instead of 1 high safety, because when you have 2 high safeties, you're more likely to kind of force them to take underneath throws and work that way. So I think that we'll see a good mix of middle of field close, middle of field open, as you should. But I do think that Florida will be this year better specifically at middle of the field open. Just because I think having the improved safety play of Jordan Castell in year 2 and Asa Turner next to him, I think that's going to open up a lot for your defense. You can still play cover 3 frequently, cover 1 frequently. You can still work a lot out of those sets with middle of the field open, and you protect yourself from more deep shots. So I think that that's going to help a lot. I do think the defense this year is going to be significantly better on film, schematically, by the numbers. It's just a matter of how much better. I think if you have an average defense this year and your offense does, again, number-wise, like EPA per play-wise, success rate-wise, if your offense does what they did or even slightly improved, which I do think you can account for, slightly improved at least because of Graham Mertz being in year 2 in the system, and then if your defense is even average at that point, we're not talking about a team where, Max Chadwick, who's here on Friday, goes, yeah, I think they win 4 games. I think if you have even an average defense with what the offense did last year or slightly improved, I think you're talking about a team that comfortably makes a bowl. Like the potential for this team is up there. It's just a matter of, did your evals hit, and did your coaching develop the true freshmen, the young players from last year? Did they develop them at the rate that they needed to develop in order to be great? Because, also with recruiting, that's been a big thing of hitting the evals for the Florida Gators, which they've done. They got to do it again in 2025, though. To wrap up today's episode of Locked On Gators, we are talking about the 2025 recruiting class by the numbers. Don't have a graphic for you here, but this is also J. Bud Davis posted this on Monday. Beautiful thing to see. Florida has used 39 of their official visits so far. 39 of their 70 official visits. Okay. That is, that's fine throughout the course of the summer. Honestly, I thought it was going to be higher just because of what Billy Napier loves. Like, Billy Napier loves hammering that summer window. He does. And they're very open about it. Like, they love him. We'll probably see a couple of them hit in the next, or get scheduled in the next few weeks for early in the season. I will also say that fall official visits, more effective. They are. And there's a lot of reasons for that. It's not exactly surprising to see that, oh, hey, guess what? Fall official visits are more effective for multiple reasons. Again, one of them being that when you have those fall official visits, it's that you're getting a kid on campus that late in the game. Like, official visits are massive for teams to make big strides and close the gap if they're trailing, but for teams to kind of jump other teams with recruiting and for teams to kind of land these, I guess, solidify themselves, we'll say. So they're great with making these big jumps. You get a full weekend, a lot of contact. You get not only do you get to talk to the players, but you get to talk to the other decision makers in their lives, their parents, their siblings, whoever it is that they bring on the official visit. You get to get access to them. Because a lot of these kids aren't just going, oh, I'm picking this school. That's it. A lot of these kids are talking to their camp, I guess we'll call them, where you go, hey, like, what do you think I should do? And Florida knocks it out of the park with the parents. I will say that. Okay. But when you get those official visits in the fall, you know what you're doing? You're setting yourself up with a closer to signing day window. So more recency bias. Like, how often do we talk about it? Or even during the summer, we go, hey, kids committing, I don't know, today's July 3rd. So a kid's committing July 3rd. We get that official visit June 21st, where the last official visit they've had, we have recency bias leading into their commitment date, right? And as we all know, in 2024, commitments, recruiting, not done until pen hits paper. Even in EA Sports College Football 25, not done till pen hits paper. So you get that recency bias. Same way when you get that initial commitment, because you had the last OV before the actual commitment on July 3rd, hypothetically, you get that recency bias. You get that when it's early to signing day. And when you do that earlier, or when you do that to early signing day, closer to early signing day, you lock that down. less time for them to waiver. That's the other important, but like that's the two-prong approach. Recruitment does not end until pen hits paper. And so if you get that fall official visit, which again, I'm not saying Florida needs to do this, it's just why I'm saying fall official visits are more effective, because you've got less time there. You got the recency bias before pen hits paper and less time for other schools to swoop in if you take the lead. And that's wildly important. Like if you have a kid, Florida plays at November 16th-ish is the LSU game. You have an official visit there. It's a month away from the early signing period. There's not a lot of time for other schools to come swoop in at that point, especially if they're making bowl games and they've got to handle that recruiting. And if you're not making a bowl game, you're at risk of being fired. So it might be new coaching staff, right? So a fall official visit's more impactful than the summer, but Florida has been awful with a hit rate this summer. 7 commits so far of those 39 official visits. That's bad. That should be like you should be at the 12 to 15 mark. And granted, there's quite a few. There's I think 16 of them uncommitted. And again, there's kids who have their commitment dates set, like Lagonza Hayward, where yeah, you're not going to land that. But at this point in time, you're not looking good. Like you should be in the, I want to say, low to mid 30s. So you should be around 12 to 15 there. You're at 7. Not good. Just want to throw that out. In the trenches, you've been awful. Jay Bud Davis here. In the trenches, you've had 17 official visits this summer. 2 of them have committed to you. 12%. Terrible. Offensive line, you had 5 official visits. 0 of them committed to you. Florida doesn't have an offensive lineman committed for the 2025 class. Horrible. 0 for 5 on the offensive line. And all of them have committed. This isn't like I mentioned, Lagonza Hayward, a safety, hasn't committed yet, so he doesn't count as, landed the commitment, whether or not he commits to Florida. But he's up in the air. He hasn't committed elsewhere. Offensive line, all 5 of the ones that you brought in for official visits are committed elsewhere. And sure, Florida's trying to make some moves with kids, and they're going to continue to try to make some moves with kids. Like Tavares Dice is someone that Florida's always going to be in contact with, although it's weird. It feels like the longer this drags out, Auburn feels more comfortable. Because, 2 months ago, this was very much like, oh, it's a 50-50 battle between Florida and Auburn. But Florida hasn't taken the lead yet. Florida hasn't landed the flip yet. At that point, it's like, well, maybe they're not going to if it's taking this long and he still hasn't committed to them. And so things get a bit, worried. But with the offensive line, like you're not waiting on decisions like you are with Lagonza Hayward. It's not. You're not waiting on decisions like you are with Donovan Olugbade, who's committing this Friday, and I don't think he's going to be a Florida Gator wide receiver. I don't think he's going to be a Gator there. And sure, kids can flip. And sure, for Florida, your biggest thing that everyone wants to see is, will you win football games? Because that's the concern. Kids are just like, well, is Florida's coaching staff going to be here? I don't want to commit if they're going to get fired, right? And so Florida has the possibility to make a late push and add some kids. But like, again, it's way easier for a class to fall apart quickly than it is for a class to come together quickly. And you've got 5.5 months or 4.5 months at this point until you get to the early signing period. Stuff gets a little rough, right? Stuff can get a little rough. And again, I'm not panicking at this point. I've been standing very pat on this. I will give them at least another couple of weeks before I start getting really frustrated and I start getting really panicky and I push the big red button. But we are approaching dangerous territory. And again, I say a few more weeks because July is usually a big month for just in terms of quantity of kids that commit in the month of July. Florida's got a chance to really make a big push on their class. But right now you're at 7. You've used over half of your OVs and you have not landed many of them. That 7 is what? 18% according to Bud Davis. It's not looking great. Just going to call a spade here. You've landed 5 of your 22 skill positions that have come on official visits, 2 of your 17 trench spots. It's not awesome. Just calling a spade a spade. But Florida, you have a lot of room, and I do think that still there's kids like Hilton Stubbs who commits on Thursday to, I'm pretty sure, Miami. Donovan Olugbade. I don't know where the staff prioritizes him. If they prioritize him, I would personally, but I don't know about that. But there's a lot of kids where I feel like if you win some games, even if they're committed elsewhere, they'll go, okay, Florida staff is going to be here. They're making some moves. I want to be a part of that, especially with DJ Lagway committed and the 2024 class having some big-time studs in it, like LJ McCray, Miles Graham. I think Florida right now, your 2025 class is very worrisome. Not big red button yet, but we are approaching. Like my fingers are reaching the big red button. But Florida, you've got a lot to do. Billy Napier, you've got to get this staff locked in, tightened up for the last half of this year. Because now, again, we are past the halfway point of 2024. You've got to lock in. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free reviews in the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk more Florida Gators football. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants, Country, and NFL 33, and I will see you all next time.